Hello, how you doing? Welcome back to another video. Australia 8, South Africa 24 in the Rugby Championship. Not the greatest of games, in all honesty. It wasn't a great spectacle. I'll get into some of that in a moment. But what it does do is make the last two weekends of the Rugby Championship really fascinating ones. The table now, New Zealand are top on 10 points, and then Argentina, Australia, South Africa follow them on 9 points. So it could go either way. Anyone could win it. But the table also tells a story in itself, really, which the Southern Hemisphere teams internationally quite inconsistent at the moment. I'll get onto that in a short moment. First of all, though, the game this morning, watching it in the UK, this evening, obviously over in Australia, in terms of that match, I mentioned that it wasn't a great game, and I think there's two reasons for this. First of all, if we look at the form of the two sides, both just inconsistent at the moment. Australia beat England in the opening test of England's summer series down under, then lost the following two. They've lost to Argentina, they then beat South Africa, come back this week and lose to the Springboks. So Australia, as has been the case for the last couple of years, really just struggling to find any sort of form or any sort of consistency at the moment. And South Africa, it's a similar story. South Africa, again, had a mixed bag of results if we look back to the last autumn when they toured the Northern Hemisphere, lost at Twickenham, but had some other good results in there. And then were inconsistent against Wales in that summer series. Wales winning the second test. I know South Africa made 15 changes or something, was a very inexperienced team, but they still lost that test match, and it was the first time that Wales have won against the Springboks in South Africa. So both teams struggling for consistency, and I think we probably saw that in this game. They're sides that on their day, they can be really dangerous and be really good and have some really good stuff, but on other occasions, they maybe struggle to have the continuity that they're probably looking for at the moment. Particularly South Africa, we've seen them play to a consistently high standard in fairly recent memory. For Australia, it's maybe not quite the case. They've been looking for that consistency for a little while now. So from that point of view, the quality of the game wasn't too surprising. And then the other part of it I felt was the officiating. Now, I didn't think it was a game in which there was one or two particularly really bad officiating calls which changed the games. There wasn't any sort of controversy from that point of view. I didn't think anyway. I'm sure if we go on social media and look at what the fans are saying, they'll maybe find something to complain about. But it was more just there was no flow in the game. And there was no flow in the game, one for the officiating and two for both sides making mistakes, which goes back to the earlier point I was making of them just being inconsistent. There was drop balls, there was sloppy play here and there, no flow in the game. But in terms of the officiating, particularly in the midfield, maybe the referee making a few kind of harsh calls, things that didn't need to be picked up on. I felt Rob Leota, the Australian back row replacement in second half, had one where he was penalised for double movement essentially in the middle of the pitch when he wasn't held. Things like that just meant the play didn't flow. It wasn't a great spectacle. And I think that's something for us all to keep an eye on as well, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, the start of the Gallagher Premiership season and the URC and so on happening in a week or so. What's the officiating like? Is that something which just happened in this game? Is it an international rugby thing, or does it happen more widely domestically as well? So not the greatest of games, but having said all that, credit to South Africa. They scored some really, really good tries. Their third try at the start of the second half, Moster, I thought was a really well-worked team move. That was really, really good stuff. And also, and I double-checked this, I heard at the end of the commentary, they said South Africa's first victory on Australia for 9 years. I have double-checked it. That is the case. So from a South African point of view, you can't knock it, really. It's a big result in terms of this Rugby Championship, and it's a big result in terms of their recent form playing the Wallabies in Australia. So credit to them. And from an Australian perspective, yeah, it's further inconsistencies, as I said. Keenan Moody as well, the South African youngster, the 19-year-old that on his debut scored a try right at the end of the first half as well, which just made that scoreline by no means insurmountable. I think it made it 12-3 at halftime, so it just took it that little bit more away from Australia, meant they had a bigger deficit heading into the halftime tunnel. And it was a really well worked try, kick over the top, and he just collected it, ran through and scored. From Korobeti's point of view for Australia, I felt like he should have done a little bit better in the air to make it more of a contest. He did kind of jump, but Moody came straight through, took the ball, and was able to race away and score a try down the right-hand side. He can also play fullback as well, so he's definitely one to look out for. And then also Willemse at 10, the fly half for South Africa, who Jacques Nienaber has said previously they view him as potentially being their next Frans Steyn. Can play fly half, can play 12, can play fullback. We saw him play fullback against Wales and saw him actually kick the winning penalty against Wales in that first test in the summer. I thought with ball in hand he did pretty well at fly half. It wasn't a particularly open game, so not the best to judge him on, but I thought he did do quite well. I think fly half is maybe a position where South Africa, in the not too distant future, maybe even now, will be looking to move on from Handré Pollard. So maybe Damien Willemse could be that guy. His kicking from the tee was ropey, having said that, so that's an area he maybe needs to improve. But as I said, we've seen him kick penalties under pressure before, the winner against Wales. So yeah, I think overall he's a big prospect and one to look out for. And then one of the final other things that I wanted to mention about was essentially the bust up towards the end when Mapimpi scored his try, the bonus point score for South Africa, and there was 15 players all rushing in, pushing and shoving, which all started because Mapimpi, after he scored the try, I mean, he didn't do too much, but he essentially pushed Korobeti in the face, nothing too bad, but then everyone else piled in. And I think that was a hangover from the test last week where Korobeti made that a no-arms tackle, really. I think the replays have shown that it was a no-arms tackle, just as Mapimpi was diving in to try and score the try. And there was been a lot of talk, I know, sort of within the South African media and amongst South African rugby fans, that really should have been picked up, and it wasn't. So I think that was a bit of a hangover from that. All the tensions boiled over. Mapimpi wanted to get one back on Korobeti, and then there was a scuffle. And I'll be honest, that scuffle was probably the most entertaining part of the game. That sums up that it wasn't necessarily the most entertaining match of rugby. But there we go. I still think a significant result in terms of this Rugby Championship, looking at the table, all to play for, and who's going to win it. If we look at international rugby at the moment, I think you'd say France and Ireland, comfortably the best two teams in the world. And then behind them, New Zealand, South Africa, England, Australia, Argentina, all these other teams are just inconsistent at the moment. And with a year to go into the World Cup, it's who can find that consistency, who can get continuity in their play to be able to string together some results. Because at the moment, they're all capable of pulling off big results and big wins. But equally, the next week, they'll go and they'll be really, really poor. New Zealand today, they've absolutely thumped Argentina after losing to them on home soil for the first time ever the week before. Very weird place at the moment, international rugby. So drop a comment down below. How do you see the landscape of the best teams in the world and what you're making of the inconsistency of some of the teams in the Rugby Championship? Like the video, always goes a long way. Would really appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel. More videos, hopefully, coming regularly on all sorts of different topics. Just discussions, thoughts on games, thoughts on rugby generally, the officiating, all that sort of stuff. Things that we've touched on in this video. Let me know what you think. See you next time.